Hello there.
Hi.
Hi, I'm sorry. I was waiting for a couple of minutes. It said the host had another meeting. So I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. No worries at all. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice to meet you.
Great to meet
So
you. Yeah.
I just want to introduce you to Nabil, who is going to be the person who's video editing.
Great.
So he'll help us set
Hello.
up to make sure everything looks okay.
Excellent. Hi, Nabil.
Nice to meet you, Dr. Jha.
Nice to meet you.
Meena.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks, Nabil.
Good. You guys are looking great. I have no comments. Meena, if you want, you can point your camera slightly lower so your head is closer to the top frame. Just a hair, a teeny
Is
bit
this
more
better?
would do. Yeah.
Meena, I love your colors of your of the thing behind you and the thing right next to you. What is that? Is that just
Thank you. It's a vase with the paint brushes in it.
It's beautiful. I love how colorful it is.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Great. I think you guys are looking good. Meena, you can go ahead and start the recording.
It's like
So-
we're recording already. It's great.
I just wanted to make sure that we are still on the split screen, right?
Right.
Do I need to change anything, Nabil? Or
No, I'm going to hide my video, okay?
okay,
And then hopefully you should see just both of you side by side. And I think
Okay.
that's going to look good. It doesn't matter who's where. I can swap that if needed, okay?
okay.
At the
So I'll
end,
just leave the setting, and as he pointed out, it's already recording, so I think we can.
it's already recording. All right. So I'm
Yeah.
going to just sign off. And what I'm going to do on my end is I'm going to have a screen recording going on just in case, just as a backup.
That sounds good.
All right.
Sounds good. Thank you.
So I'm going to switch off my video. I'm going to start the screen recording, and then I'll just give you a visual cue, and then I'm going to go on mute, and then you can start. All right. Thank you. Just sizing it for my screen. Just
Okay.
1 minute. And I am recording, and I'm going on mute. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I start, Nabil?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just give me a couple of seconds. I'm going to go on mute, and then you can start. All right.
Okay.
And
Hello, everyone. We are privileged and honored to have Dr. Ashish Jha, Dean of the Brown University School of Public Health, with us here today. Dr. Jha, thank you for joining us at the Power of Education Forum to share your perspectives on the global COVID pandemic and also the post-pandemic future.
Meena, thank you so much.
Considering that, thank
Sorry.
you.
Thank you for having me here.
Right. I'll just start again. So
Okay, let's start.
I'm just going to give that brief introduction, and then I'll wait for you to respond, and then I'll start the question. So,
Okay.
can I just interject once
Please.
more? Meena, just sorry. Meena, if you could just clear your hair from here a little bit, yeah. And Meena, during the conversation, if
Yeah.
you want to kind of just give a visual sort of like acknowledgement or so
Okay.
that's great. Try to avoid the audio acknowledgement because the Zoom will keep switching the audio from one person to the other, right? So if while speaking, if you go okay, that sort of is a little distracting. So a visual acknowledgement is great. And as much as possible, try looking into the camera versus at the screen. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm going to go off.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. We are delighted and honored to have Dr. Ashish Jha, Dean of the Brown University School of Public Health, here with us today. Dr. Jha, thank you for joining us at the Power of Education Forum to share your perspectives on the global COVID pandemic and the post-pandemic future.
Meena, thank you so much for having me. I'm really delighted to be here.
Thank you. Considering that majority of us are suffering from pandemic exhaustion and pandemic fatigue, I thought we'll get started on a hopeful note. So recently, The Atlantic published a headline stating that this could be quite possibly a wonderful summer, referring to the summer of 2021. Do you share that optimism?
I do. I'm actually very optimistic. Certainly here in the United States, I think we are going to have a very good summer, a close to normal summer. Now, that's just unfortunately the US. I think many parts of the world will continue to suffer from the weight of this pandemic, but I'm very, very optimistic about the short and medium run in terms of the United States.
That is very good to hear. At the recent US Senate Health Committee hearing, you were pretty candid in stating that although the vaccine rollout is exciting, that's not really going to end the pandemic. So, would you care to elaborate on that, and so that the audience understands what the remaining concerns may be regarding the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are few things to understand. I mean, first of all, again, the vaccine rollout in the United States is going very, very well. Probably the best in the world, or one of the best in the world. I mean, there are a couple of countries that may be doing it better, but it's one of the best. And what that means is that we're looking forward to, I think, a very good summer here. But there are two sets of issues. One is global vaccination, because this is a global pandemic, and the global pandemic does not come to an end until the whole world is vaccinated. Unfortunately, we may be a long time away from that. So that's one set of challenges. And then the second is, even if we vaccinate much of the United States, there are going to be important challenges. We're going to expect this virus to make a resurgence in the fall and winter. We may see variants of the virus, which may challenge our vaccines. So the virus doesn't go away. We will have to continue to deal with it. But the way it is oppressing us right now, the kind of fog that sits over all of us, that will lift and will get better, I think, in the months ahead.
That's really good news. So, regarding quarantining, you were one of the earliest proponents of quarantining. So, I'm interested in understanding, how did you manage all the way through 2020? Do you have any interesting stories to share with our audience about the challenges of quarantining with the family and children at home?
Yeah, I do remember very early in March, as I was seeing the numbers and the models coming out and calling quite loudly for shutting things down, for really taking a pause for what I thought would be a short period of time, because what I assumed was that we as a nation would quickly ramp up our testing infrastructure. We would get a really good grip on how widespread the infection was, and then we could begin to slowly open back up to normal. We never did a lot of those things. So it has been a very, very difficult year. On a personal note, in the early days, I was starting to work from home as everybody else was. And at one point, my family asked, just because I was spending so much time on TV and media and talking to political leaders, they actually asked if there was any other place I could go safely. So I got special dispensation from my university, because I was working on COVID, to go to my office. Of course, there was no one at my office, so it was very safe to do so. But for much of the pandemic, I actually was working out of a large empty office. It was all a very surreal experience, as all of us went through this past year. Everybody has their own version of how they accommodated and made changes to try to deal with what was such an unusual year.
Totally agreed. I think all of us can relate to what you're mentioning about having to isolate yourself in a different location, so that you don't have to put your whole life, in public view all the time. So now, coming back to the silver linings, vaccine development has been one such silver lining and a hopeful sign of the pandemic. Are you aware of other things that have worked really well during this pandemic?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So certainly we should talk about vaccines, because it has been remarkable. And it's not just about the vaccines, it's global cooperation in science in this pandemic has been extraordinary. So I think we often see these vaccines as the UK vaccine or the German vaccine or the American vaccine. these are all really global vaccines developed by scientists around the world, working together. So I think one of the huge silver linings coming out of this pandemic is how much more aligned the global scientific community is, how well they have worked together, how they have set competition aside to cooperate on really complicated issues. I hope it becomes a model for tackling other global health, public health, medical problems. Really the beginning of what I hope will be a long-term new set of cooperation among scientists.
It's a great observation. You know, despite the increase in political conflict, I think the collaboration on the scientific and medical front has been very heartening. And also the evolution in technology, since most of us had to do many things remotely. And I work in the pharmaceutical arena, so we had to come up with a lot of strategies to manage patients remotely, deliver medicines to them, you know, in a different manner than what we do normally. So it's been a blessing in disguise in other ways to innovate in the system. So, coming to the point of your collaborations, I know you have a big interest in improving the quality of healthcare delivery in India. So, have you had any collaborations in the COVID front in terms of public health policy improvements or the vaccine rollout? Could you share some, some of the work you've been doing?
Yeah, in India, most of the work I've been involved in so far has largely been around working and engaging with policymakers, both on controlling of COVID. Certainly in the last spring and summer, it was helping policymakers make good decisions and create new policies for how to keep the pandemic at bay. Of course, India has had a very unusual course in the pandemic where things looked really quite bad through last summer. But then as we went into the fall and winter, things got surprisingly better. And I think in a way that not many of us were expecting. I also think the healthcare system in India has been quite battered. I mean, we've certainly seen lots of healthcare workers get infected and sick. So as we emerge from this pandemic, one of the lessons of India, in my mind, is that India has to make a much, much bigger set of investments in its healthcare infrastructure, in public health. Right now, India underspends on both public health and healthcare compared to many other countries. And so my hope is that the Indian government, the Indian people, make a commitment to really spending a lot more and building up that public health infrastructure, not just to get through this pandemic, but future ones as well.
Understood. So, going back to your statement around, you know, you can't just protect one territory or one country, because even if you manage to clear out the COVID virus, if your neighboring country has it, then, you know, it's going to make you susceptible as well. So, thinking about, equity in healthcare and making vaccines available globally, what are your thoughts around that? Since there's a lot of, news media coverage of the vaccine diplomacy from India.
Yeah, this is, I think, the biggest challenge facing us right now in the world. I do think places like the US, UK will be largely vaccinated by the time we get into May or June, but most of the world will not be. And there are two problems with a world where most of the world is still waiting for their first shot and small number of countries have gotten fully vaccinated. One problem is just the inequity, just the fact that you're going to see some societies open up doing well and other societies suffering large numbers of people getting infected and dying. Of course, that unto itself is a huge problem. But there's a second one, which is what we have seen so far, which is the rise of these variants. And these variants have often risen in the context of large outbreaks. And so if we continue to let large outbreaks happen, we're going to see more variants and they may threaten the vaccines we already have. And so we need a global strategy to vaccinate everybody around the world, whether you're in India or Brazil or South Africa or Germany or anywhere else. And right now, I don't think we're seeing enough attention and energy being placed on this. And so I and others have been calling for really a global strategy for ramping up vaccine production. That does mean partnering with institutions, organizations that can make vaccines like, of course, like the Serum Institute of India, but there are others in India and other countries. We really have to look at the vaccine manufacturing infrastructure and think about how we optimize that to produce a lot more vaccines now.
Got it. So, from a public health policy perspective, what are the key lessons that the global community has learned from this COVID pandemic?
Well, I think there are several lessons that we've all learned. I mean, one certainly is that if you underinvest in public health, as we in the US have been doing, I would say that pretty much everybody in the world has been doing. It's fine until a crisis hits. And when a crisis hits, you can't immediately just ramp up the public health infrastructure. We've noticed that we didn't have enough contact tracers. The data systems in public health have been really quite awful. We didn't have public health expertise to the level that we needed. So, and the effects are not just in public health, right? They have shut down our economy. They've had this profound negative effect on our society. So I really believe that this is a wake-up call for policymakers around the world to say, public health is not a luxury. It's not a nice thing to have. You need to have it, just as we think about national defense, that you don't use it most of the times, but it's really important to have for when you do need it. Public health is very much the same way, and we need to make those kinds of investments in public health.
So, with the vaccine rollout ramping up, I think everybody has started making plans for traveling and getting out in the summer. So, what would be your advice for people who feel liberated now that they have received the vaccine?
Yeah, my advice to people is twofold. There's a short term and then there's a long term. I think in the long term, it's going to be great. Once a vast majority of Americans are vaccinated, I think traveling within the United States, I think seeing friends, family, living close to a normal life is going to be very possible. And that is going to come as early as this summer. I think in the short run, right now in March and April of this year, while a majority of high risk people, people who are older, people with chronic diseases, still have not yet been vaccinated, we have to be a little bit careful. I think we should not throw away the mask. We should not act like the pandemic is over. We should not relax all public health restrictions. We should be careful in slowly ramping up until all high-risk people are vaccinated, and then waiting until everybody else, all other adults who want to be vaccinated are vaccinated before we open up fully. But I think that's only a couple of months away. It's not a long time away.
That is really good to hear. So, on that very positive note, Dr. Jha, I want to thank you once again for participating in this Power of Education forum and sharing your perspectives on a bright post pandemic future for the globe with the audience. And also, I want to personally thank you as a scientist for standing up and speaking up for science, data, and evidence. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure. We really are looking forward to a bright future, but we still have some work to do, and I was really honored to get a chance to spend some time and talk about it. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you. I'll stop the recording now. So
That was very nice. Thank you very much.